Dead and Gone, but Not Forgotten. Part 2, Metal's Fallen Titans. These are the ones who redefined heavy. So some musicians don't just play metal. They absolutely define it. They push boundaries, create new sounds, and leave behind a legacy of heaviness that echoes through time. But sometimes, these people are taken from us far too soon. So welcome back to Headbangers History. This is where we honor the legends who built metal with their blood, with their sweat and riffs. In part 2 of our Gone Too Soon series, we're diving into 5 metal titans who changed the game, only to be ripped away from us before their time. From thrash to classic metal, groove to death metal, these were the artists who redefined heaviness. So horns up for the people. Welcome to Headbangers History, where riffs reign supreme and legends are born. Let's dive into the heart-pounding history of hard rock and heavy metal. Number 1, Bon Scott. He died in 1980, the hard rock rebel who almost didn't make it before Brian Johnson took AC/DC to global superstardom. Bon Scott was the heart and soul. He had raw energy that made this band. His voice was a mix of swagger, grit, and reckless abandon, and his lyrics were pure rock and roll attitude. His biggest impact was he brought bluesy, hard-hitting vocals that made AC/DC's early albums absolutely legendary. Some of his famous tracks were Highway to Hell, Let There Be Rock, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, Big Balls.
But we've got the biggest balls of them all, and my balls are always bouncing.
His cause of death was alcohol poisoning in London in 1980. Would Back in Black have been even bigger if Bon had survived? How different would AC/DC have sounded? Number 2 is Randy Rhoads, great guitarist, died in 1982. The guitar prodigy who revolutionized metal at just 25 years old, Randy Rhoads was already being hailed as a guitar god. His neoclassical shredding and intricate solos on Ozzy Osbourne's first 2 solo albums changed metal guitar forever. His biggest impact was merging classical influences with metal, and it set the blueprint for shredders like Yngwie Malmsteen and Zakk Wylde, who followed him eventually. Some of his famous tracks were Crazy Train, Mr. Crowley, Diary of a Madman, among many others. His cause of death was tragically a plane crash in Florida in 1982.
Private plane buzzed the house in Leesburg, Florida, where the group was staying. On the third pass, the pilot clipped their tour bus, parked outside, and plowed into the house, killing the group's lead guitarist, Randall Rhoads, and the makeup artist, Rachel Youngblood. He also killed himself. Ozzy Osbourne was sitting in the bus at the time, but somehow survived unhurt. All the other members of the group also escaped, even though petrol from the wrecked plane started a fierce fire and gutted the house.
So if Rhoads had lived, would Ozzy's 80s albums have been even greater? Could he have joined a new metal supergroup? Who knows? These are the questions I'm asking.
A for effort, son.
Number 3, one that hit me hard, was Cliff Burton, who died in 1986. The bass wizard who changed Metallica forever. Before Metallica became the biggest metal band in the world, they had Cliff as a bassist, who played like a lead guitarist. He had a unique style of playing, songwriting. His classical influences made Metallica's early albums something special. His biggest impact was proving that bass wasn't just background noise. It could actually drive the music. Some of his famous tracks are Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, a great bass solo, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Orion, so many of them. His cause of death was a bus accident in Sweden in 1986.
WRTN Inertia, home of Midnight Metal, of course, tonight dedicating the entire show to Cliff Burton of Metallica, who died early this Saturday morning in a tragic auto accident. The tour bus of Metallica, of course, going off the road during their tour in Sweden, and just...
Would Metallica's sound have changed so drastically in the 90s if Cliff had lived? Would we have ever gotten the Black Album? You never know.
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question.
And then there's Dimebag Darrell. He died in 2004. This groove metal king was murdered on stage. Few guitarists defined an entire genre the way Dimebag Darrell did for the groove metal. His riffs were crushing, his solos were wild, and his personality was as big as his sound. He absolutely took Pantera to legendary status and was set to dominate metal once again until this tragedy struck. His biggest impact was inventing a groove metal and influencing bands like Lamb of God, Machine Head, Gojira. One of my new favorites. Some of his famous tracks were Walk, Cowboys from Hell, Floods. His cause of death was murdered on stage during a Damage Plan show in 2004.
See shooter Nathan Gale in a black jacket and baseball cap charging on a stage and pulling out a gun. He was headed straight for Dimebag Darrell, the band's lead guitarist. The crowd, shocked, unbelievably didn't move. Someone on stage.
So if Dimebag had lived, could Pantera have reunited? Would we have seen more legendary albums from him and Vinnie Paul? I hope. I want to believe we would. And then there's Paul Gray, who died in 2010. He was the silent leader of Slipknot, while Corey Taylor and Joey Jordison got most of the spotlight. Paul Gray was the backbone of Slipknot. As their bassist and primary songwriter, he helped craft their most brutal and emotional tracks. His biggest impact was creating Slipknot's signature heavy, chaotic, and yet still melodic sound. Some of the famous tracks are Duality, Psychosocial, Before I Forget. His cause of death? Accidental overdose in Iowa in 2010.
Developing story right now. Just within the last few hours, we've confirmed that the bassist for the band Slipknot has died.
He was found dead in an Urbandale motel room. News Channel 8's Amanda Lewis has the details. Amanda.
Well, they've been circulating rumors all day about 38-year-old Paul Gray, and now we're learning that those rumors are true. Urbandale police say employees of the Town Place Suites at 8800 North Park Drive found Gray in a hotel room this morning. In this video, you can see them removing Gray's things from the hotel. Police say they found no evidence of foul play.
Could Slipknot have maintained their intensity and raw emotion if Paul had stayed? And how much of their later sound did they lose without him? So in closing, who left the biggest void in metal? Every one of these musicians changed the game. Some shaped the sound of entire subgenres. Some were just getting started. And some left us wondering what could have been. So which fallen titan do you think had the biggest impact on metal? Let's chat in the comments. Type it below. And next up in our series, the voices that will never be replaced. We've talked about the Shredders, and the songwriters. But what about the vocalists? In part 3, we're going to dive into the irreplaceable frontmen, the voices that left us far too soon. From Freddie Mercury, Wayne Staley, Ronnie James Dio, to Chester Bennington. So who do you think was the greatest metal voice we lost too soon? Let's debate it. See you again tomorrow. This Headbangers History.